I'm Karen Brown. You're listening to Mississippi Edition on MPB Think Radio. We're going to begin a discussion on domestic violence in Mississippi, and we invite you to log on to mpbonline.org right now. We are going to do an online chat in conjunction with this. A Louisiana woman leaves her place of work. She's driving, and a car forces her off the road. She's then kidnapped and taken to a hotel. She escapes, running and screaming for help. Her kidnapper chases her down to the hotel lobby's bathroom. He shoots and kills her, then turns the gun on himself. It sounds like the latest Hollywood blockbuster. It is not, I can assure you. This horrible scene took place in Macomb, Mississippi yesterday. The alleged killer was the victim's estranged husband. Mississippi ranks second in the nation for domestic violence and fifth for domestic violence homicides. We're joined by Sandy Middleton from the Center for Violence Prevention, Heather Wagner from the State Attorney General's Office, and a victim of domestic abuse, and we will refer to her simply as Mary during this interview. Good morning to all three of you.
Good morning.
Mary, we're going to begin with your story. Tell us, what happened to you? What made you a victim?
Well, I started out as a very sheltered girl. I got married at 24 to my best friend, and 48 hours later, he began just screaming at me for no reason, and didn't stop for about 4 years.
He didn't scream at you while you were dating, while you
No.
were engaged?
No. From what I've heard, that's pretty common. I don't know, I think he knew exactly what he had to do to keep me, and kept that up the entire 4 years that we were together even. He would never push it past the point that he thought I would leave, that he kept the threats.
So there was threat of physical violence?
Yes.
Or worse? Did he threaten to kill you ever?
He never threatened to kill me, but he did things that I would worry about more. He would say things like, I want to beat you, I want to hurt you sometimes. He would torture my dog in front of me, throw her around, throw her against the side of the house, broke her leg in two one time.
And during the 4.5 years that this occurred, did he manage to convince you that it was your fault, that you deserved to be yelled at?
All the time.
And did you believe that?
For some of it I believed it, and for some of it I didn't, and most of the time I just had no idea what to think. It was just, and he sort of set everything up so that the friends around us were backing him up. He would drive me around with the child locks on, just screaming bloody murder at me in front of our son, and we'd get to right outside the door of a Bible study we were going to, and tell me, hey, if you don't shape up, I'm gonna take our son to Brazil, and you'll never see him again. And then the door would open, and he'd put his arm around me and be like, hey, babe, you look kind of upset. Are you okay? We'll get you a drink of water, right in front of the friends. And so I was the bad guy.
What prompted you to finally leave? Was it to protect yourself or to protect your son, or both of you?
Both. I reported marital rape to the DHS after I had a file at the women's shelter for about 6 months. This was in Oregon, actually. And it occurred the last time on my birthday 2 years ago. And they said, we're going to have to, if you aren't willing to leave, we might have to take your son out of this house because of all the stuff that you've been reporting. We need to get you out. And so they got me on a plane from Mississippi and stayed with relatives. And right after I got here was when I met Sandy Middleton, and been kind of going through that ever since. So
We're going to let you rest for a second, and thank you for sharing that story. Sandy Middleton, Mary just told us that this is common. A person woos her or another woman, and they're sweet as can be, and they turn into a monster the next day. It's all pre-planned?
Exactly. That's typical behavior for a batterer. Obviously, she wouldn't have married him if he had shown his true colors before the fact. So it's it's typical behavior. It's typical behavior for batterers to follow this procedure, and also you heard her talk about the isolation. That's another really important ploy that they use in order to control. It's important to isolate the victims from any type of support system. And then you also heard her talk about the mind games.
Because it also, I would imagine, isolating takes away perspective and takes
Exactly.
away reality compared to everyone else's reality.
Exactly, and she begins to consider her environment as normal because that's all she knows. She has very little interaction or support system from her own family or her own friends, and so she begins to consider her own dysfunctional environment as appropriate.
Ms. Wagner from the Attorney General's office, at what point and we're talking about women being abused by men, and I know that there may be some instances, but that is primarily where abuse lies. At what point normally does your office get involved? What makes a woman finally come forward and seek help and seek retribution or justice against the person who's abusing her?
It varies. Each victim or each woman that is going through this, or each man that's going through this, has their own different level of breaking point, when the breaking point will come. We do know that domestic violence is typically underreported. The majority of victims don't ever report to the authorities. They may find relief, they may get out in other fashions, they may go to family who's supportive, they may go to shelters, but a vast number of victims never do report to the authorities. Now, as far as our office, the Attorney General's office becoming involved, we provide assistance to the shelters. We provide technical assistance to the shelters as they assist the victims moving through the legal process to get a protective order. We'll provide them with guidance on how best to advise the victims how to proceed.
Mary, I'm glad you shared your story, and I think there's an element here that people might be interested in hearing, in that you were not physically abused. And some people may say, well, you're yelled at. Did you have trouble yourself believing that that form of abuse, to be constantly yelled at and threatened in that manner, was even against the law, and that you had legal recourse?
I really didn't know for nearly all of it that I had any legal recourse. I was even told by, I guess well-meaning friends that first that they didn't believe me, and two that that's not abuse, and that I was wrong for leaving him, and that kind of thing. People that were just they just couldn't believe it of him. They'd known him for so long, and but yeah, just the shoving around, holding me down, rape, it wasn't injuring me, and so
outright,
I
where
think
other
most
people
women
could see.
feel that
He was injuring you.
Right.
It's just that other people
exactly.
weren't seeing
there
the
weren't
scars.
There weren't physical injuries.
Is this common, Miss Middleton, that the abuser is smart enough to know, as long as no one can see it,
Absolutely.
I'm good to go?
Absolutely, and you have to remember that domestic abuse is about power and control. It's not about violence. It's about power and control, and that's what he was exacting over her. Was he was controlling her every thought, and he was controlling her out of fear. She was afraid, and she mentioned the incident with her pet, and that's a huge red flag for lethality and danger, and so we're just the good news is though that she was able to get out, and she's got a great story now because you see that smile on her face now, so she's got good news.
Ms. Wagner, how effective are restraining orders, and is that the answer? Because it sounds like abusers are going to follow the abusee, the victim, around. They're not going to give up.
You very often hear the term that a protective order is just a piece of paper. It is a piece of paper, and for some offenders it will be effective knowing that the court system is involved and somebody is aware of the situation. For some offenders it will not prevent, and we always caution victims that this piece of paper is not a 24-hour security system. It is a tool that law enforcement and the courts can use to help the victim stay safer.
Then what is the answer? How does a woman in a situation, because I imagine there are thousands and thousands of women who are in the situation that Mary was in, or worse, or not as bad, and they want to be rescued. They want to help themselves, and they don't know how because of the fear. He's always going to be there. He's going to get me.
Well, the other point, Heather, is that not only does the protective order do the things that she mentioned, but a protective order also empowers the woman. Every chance you get to empower a victim to start making their own decisions and start to move away from this sickness that they're just intertwined in, then they start to begin to feel a little bit better and feel a little bit stronger, and they can begin to move away. They can begin to see a glimmer of hope, and that's so important in moving these victims to safety.
And getting directly to your question of, what is the answer, there's no one single thing that you can point to as the answer to resolve this issue. It involves the whole community becoming involved, the law enforcement system effectively responding to the cases, the courts effectively responding when they have requests for protective orders where there's substantial evidence of abuse, and issuing the orders, and holding offenders accountable when they violate those orders, because it is a misdemeanor in the state of Mississippi to violate a protective order that's issued in a domestic violence
Talk
case.
about the Duluth model that's being modeled here in Mississippi.
And that's another way, another part of it. We've always talked in the past about victims, providing services for victims, and the Duluth model is a program for the abusers that provides them services, because as Mary was talking about and Sandy's talking about, the abuse isn't about the violence, it's about the power and control, and that power and control develops from belief systems that these abusers have grown up with or have acquired in some way, and the Duluth model gets these offenders. It's a 24-week program.
Right.
That the offenders may be, first-time offenders may be referred to, that gets to the belief systems. It's not a way to manage your anger. It's a way to change your belief system so that you no longer have those issues. And Sandy probably can explain a little bit better than I.
Right, and that's, the focus of the last 2 or 3 days has been over the Center for Violence Prevention's kickoff of our Batterer's intervention program, and it will be the first for the metro area. Usually what we've had here in this area has just been the anger management program, which, as Heather said, it's not the same thing. Anger management deals with actions and feelings. The Batterer's intervention program addresses the core beliefs of what these men think and what they believe, and their rights to treat women in certain ways. And so we're really excited about this program, and it gives judges an opportunity to order these men into this program, and they've got 24 weeks in a group setting. It's a behavior modification type program, and they've got 24 weeks where their behavior is going to be put in their face, and they're going to have to deal with it, and it's proven to be very successful across the country.
One of the reasons we're having this discussion today is prior to the Chick Ball, a big event, and I want to give you time to talk about what it is and how people can participate, whether they attend the ball or not.
Yeah, our Chick Ball, it just gets bigger and better every year thanks to the Jackson Free Press. This is our 5th year, and this year we've expanded to 2 nights. Friday night we will have at Howlin' Mouse a 1-act play that's focused on a domestic violence victim and her experiences and survival, and that begins at 6:30. Doors open at 6:30. The play begins at 7 tonight, and it's $15 entry fee. And the big night, of course, is Saturday night at Howlin' Mouse, where that's the big Chick Ball, and it begins at 6, and entrance is $5, and we have a huge lineup of female entertainment and just an unbelievable silent auction. We've just been deluged with gifts and contributions from the community. So it's a wonderful experience, and it's an opportunity for the community to come together and support not only what we're doing for domestic violence victims, but also this new program for Batterer's intervention.
Well, I thank all 3 of you for being here, and Mary, I want to say to you, welcome to Mississippi. I hope you find this a safe haven for yourself and your little boy, and thank you for sharing a very personal story with us. I'm Karen Brown. You've been listening to Mississippi Edition on MPB Think Radio. By the way, we did tape this segment on domestic violence, And it will be available online for you to see on the Jackson Free Press website. So thank you again to our guests. Thank you to our listeners.
Thank you.
And I hope you all have a wonderful weekend, and we'll be back here Monday morning at 8:30 to join us then. Bye-bye.